Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Arielle Sokoloff. I'm the Senior Engagement Manager at JDC Entwine, and I want to welcome you to this week's Entwine Exclusive. We're excited to have a lot of new people on the exclusive this week. So for those of you who don't know us yet, Entwine is the young adult platform of JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, the world's leading Jewish humanitarian organization operating in over 70 countries worldwide. A couple of housekeeping tips. Miriam is on here monitoring the Q&A and the chat on Zoom, and we have somebody on Facebook. So feel free to put in questions for our panelists at any time here or on Facebook, and we'll have a designated time at the end to answer your questions. Also, so you know, my internet has been a little bit spotty today. So just in case there's any technical difficulties, Miriam is going to hop in to take over, but hopefully we'll be all set. Today's webinar is going to focus on COVID-19's impact on vulnerable communities in the developing world. And we're really going to highlight the work of JDC GRID, which is our international development platform on the ground. Before we get started, we're going to do something a little different. And I want to take a quick pulse check for who is in the room with a short poll. So I'm going to launch a poll for those of you here on Zoom. It should pop up on your computer. And for those on Facebook, it's going to be posted in the comments. So I'm launching that now. And the two questions we're asking of our audience that I hope you'll answer is, to what extent has your social media included global updates? Global is regularly in the spotlight, every once in a while, or it's much more focused on local and national news. And when you think about your own giving, whether of time or financial resources, to what extent do you prioritize supporting non-Jewish communities? To a great extent, somewhat, or not really. So I see the answers coming in, and I will give it a few seconds for everyone to fill that out. About 3 more seconds if people haven't answered yet. It looks like most have responded, which is great. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and I should be able to share the results. It looks like a lot of people are seeing global in the spotlight. Actually, it's pretty split between people seeing global news in the spotlight and it being much more focused on local or national news. And when people think about their giving, to a great extent, they're prioritizing supporting non-Jewish communities. Some people, about 38%, are saying somewhat, and 12% not really. So this is really interesting to see, and we'll kind of dive into the why and how we're seeing a lot of local as opposed to global on our news feeds from our great speakers today. So COVID-19 poses an especially significant threat to vulnerable people in developing countries. A lot of things that we take for granted that we have access to, like healthcare and clean water for hand washing and just the ability to social distance, people in some of these poorest communities don't have access to it. And because of this, they're already being hit very hard by this global health crisis, and it's anticipated that it's only going to get worse. So this week, I'm so honored to be speaking with Avital Sandler-Loeff, who's the Executive Director of JDC GRID, and Dyonna Ginsburg, who's the Executive Director of OLAM, who are both calling in from Israel. We are going to learn about the work JDC GRID and other international nonprofits are doing to help these communities, help them really leverage their own creativity and innovation and resilience to meet this unprecedented challenge. And on a personal note, this is one of my favorite topics, international development, and the work that JDC does in non-Jewish communities around the world is what drew me to JDC in the first place. So I'm just so honored to be able to speak with both of you and to dive into this topic. So thank you for being here. To get started, I'm going to turn it to Dyonna. If you could share a bit about yourself and OLAM, and how and why did you first get involved in this area of work?
Sure. Thanks so much, Arielle. I was born and raised in New York to a very proud Jewish family. My father is a rabbi. My mother is Israeli, born in a secular kibbutz. And I grew up being taught to get involved in broader society. Some of my earliest memories are going to Soviet Jewry rallies on behalf of Jews in the former Soviet Union who were not able to practice Jewish tradition freely. And I moved to Israel straight out of college in 2002, in large part out of a desire to roll up my sleeves and get involved in domestic social change issues. And fast forward to today, I am, as Arielle mentioned, the Executive Director of OLAM, which is a shared platform of over 50 Jewish and Israeli organizations, JDC GRID and JDC Entwine being two of our trusted partners. And these organizations work with vulnerable non-Jewish communities in the developing world. And OLAM serves as the connector, communicator, and convener of this field. And so for me, OLAM is really a culmination of a lot of what I was taught at home. And I'm really excited to be in this conversation today, in particular with Avital. Work is so critical now more than ever.
Thank you. And Avital, same question, if you could share about yourself and how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in JDC forever, really, more than 20 years. I've started as a researcher, and then I've established together with Tamara Bernea, Israel Unlimited, our partnership in the area of people with disabilities, which I cherish and I love. And GRID, JDC GRID, back then IDP was my dream job. I always said, kids will grow up, and when, and Wendy, my the former director of beloved director of GRID, told me that she's going to leave GRID. I applied, and I'm very excited. For me, it's personally, it means a lot to work in this world, and I think that many of the things I've tried to promote in the area of disabilities are so relevant here. Person-centered approach, looking at the needs of people, and all kinds of things that you'll hear about later. JDC GRID, JDC has been active in helping humanitarian disasters at the last 40 years, even more so. Every disaster that you can, the big ones that you can think of, Haiti, Philippines, Nepal, recently Mozambique, Bahamas, Mexico, we're there, and we're very proud at this work, and I empathize what Arielle said before. This is also makes me proud to be part of JDC, and now I have the privilege of leading it. And so this is the disaster area. But in addition, we work a lot in the developing world and trying to empower. You may heard about our TOV program, which is helping smallholders, farmers with the Israeli technology to increase their crops and get microloans from the bank in order to be sustained and get out of poverty. So we work a lot in this area, and we have a great big health program in Ethiopia, and we work on women empowerment. Our next big project is working with Jewish communities to help the non-sectarian or the non-Jewish populations, and we'll share about it a little later.
Thank you. And I mean, you mentioned JDC GRID's long history in working in the international development space. What are some of the challenges you're seeing right now that have resulted from the pandemic?
So first of all, we launched projects in the issue of COVID-19 because this is our mandate. We are supposed to help when there is a humanitarian disaster. And so we did it right away. But we also look at the challenges that this world is bringing, because we have to run projects remotely. For example, Tov that I just spoke of, and the internet connections, well, in places in Africa where you don't have any electricity or running water or a health system working. So this is kind of a dream, and we're struggling how to bring the know-how and the knowledge to this community. So this is one challenge. The other challenge is this is not the only disaster that they are facing right now. We're talking about the locust swarms that are attacking East Africa right now and causing poverty and causing hunger. We're talking about wars in certain areas, and we're talking about hunger, severe hunger. There was a huge article about it right today. I can share it with Arielle later, and she can share it with all of you. It's quite depressing, and there is an analysis that McKinsey just made regarding the what's going to happen to Africa when it reach to numbers like you are facing in New York right now, or people were facing in Italy and in Spain. What capacity will they have? Surprised they probably won't have to deal with this.
And Dyonna, OLAM works with organizations and nonprofits in developing countries around the world. What are some of the things you're hearing from your partners that are particularly challenging right now during the pandemic?
So many of the OLAM partner organizations are directly involved either in trying to prevent the spread of coronavirus among vulnerable populations in the developing world, promoting hygiene and water and good sanitation, or are dealing with some of the issues related to hunger, which Avital mentioned. I think the article that you were referring to was the UN came out with a statement today saying that they're concerned that we're going to see famines of biblical proportions, is the exact quote, with 130 million people facing famine as a direct result of some of the lockdowns that are happening in countries around the world.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Dilly.
So there's this debate that's going on between what people have called lives and livelihoods, and a lot of our partners are on the front lines of dealing with both of those, but I actually think that that's not a fair dichotomy. I actually think that's about saving lives in the immediate term because of the spread of coronavirus, and saving lives in the mid to long term because of the impacts of some of the effects of coronavirus. And one population that's particularly vulnerable are the over 70 million forcibly displaced people around the world, refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced people. So just to give one example, the largest refugee camp in Lesbos in Greece was built to house 3,000 people. There are currently 20,000 people there, and there's only one water tap per 1,300 people. So if we can imagine the impacts that I think many of us are feeling in terms of social distancing and frequent hand washing and all of those things, what does that look like for a population that doesn't have the luxury of social distancing and clean water?
And how, a question for both of you, I guess you can start with Avital. There are so many organizations around the world that are working with communities to address these issues. What is JDC doing to work with its partners? How are you identifying what some of the most pressing issues and needs are at a time when there's just so many?
So this makes me really smile. I'm so excited and proud and happy to be here. First of all, on May 6th, we have a webinar with Dr. Rick Hodds, who runs our program in Ethiopia, our health program. Now he's located in the US because of the virus. And he connected to Professor Neil Schulger from Columbia University, and he is the head of pulmonary department and has a lot of, he's a big shot in the area of health and working specifically on pandemics. So he'll be leading and mentoring and teaching on a webinar on May 6, doctors from Africa, how to cope with the COVID. And Dyonna and you and whoever can help us to spread the message. We are very well connected in Ethiopia, but doctors from all over the world and especially from Africa are most welcome. And if it will work good, we'll do a series of telemedicine and mentoring like this. This is number one. Number two, we have an amazing program right now with NALA in Ethiopia. NALA is a great organization working on WASH and preventing epidemics, and now with this pandemic, and we are working very closely with them. And we have we put water stations in different places in Ethiopia because 41% of households don't have water in their homes. So this is critical to allow them to stay safe. And we also did a campaign that touched 175,000 people in Amharic and other languages in Ethiopia to teach them how to cope with the COVID. And we are working with religious leaders to work and to prevent it and to see how they teach and preach in their sermons or their religious meetings about social distance. And this is something we're doing there. We're also working in Ethiopia with SEWA, a cooperative of women who are now, their livelihood is sewing masks and hand sanitizers and producing food. But I know we'll speak about gender later, so maybe I'll talk about this later on. And in addition, we have to change all the way we operate in each project. So, for example, TOG, right now, when we're used to fly to Ethiopia at least once a month, we need to run everything remotely. We have amazing volunteers with our partner Fair Planet, and we brought them all back to Israel, and this is really, really frustrating. On the other side, we were always looking for producing materials that will be extremely accessible to people who are sometimes illiterate and do not, so using graphics and infographics and stuff. So this is an opportunity to say, you know, you always delay those kind of things because of the urgency of others, and now it's the time to use it and to do it, and we're able to continue working. So this is what we're doing. And in Mozambique, for example, we're looking for ways to divert some of the funding we're doing following the cyclone towards coping with the COVID, and we're checking what are the needs in the Bahamas where we work, and in Indonesia, and in other places where we are located.
It sounds like the partnerships and just the ability for all of these organizations to respond to needs in the moment and really understand what the needs are of the people on the ground is a bright spot in all of this craziness right now. Dyonna, what are some bright spots you're seeing with the organizations that you're working with?
Sure. So one is a bright spot that I actually read about that's not from our own partners, but I'm reminded of it because Avital spoke a lot about Ethiopia, and I've had the privilege to be in Ethiopia twice and visit JDC projects on the ground, including TOG. So I'm really inspired by innovation that's coming out of the developing world in this regard. So the whole world is grappling with the lack of enough ventilators. There are 10 countries in Africa that don't have a single ventilator. But one of the issues is also having access to trained staff who are able to utilize ventilators, having access to oxygen, etc. And so in Ethiopia, there was just not enough piped oxygen. And I recently came across a story that said that denim factories use oxygen in the garment dyeing process. And so the Ethiopian Ministry of Health has actually turned to local denim factories to help provide oxygen for machines to get prepared. So that to me was just an amazing story of innovation coming out of the developing world. But in terms of our own partner organizations, I've been really impressed by people's ability to pivot. So similar to the telemedicine that Avital spoke about, you know, whether it's HIAS or IsraAid providing critical support to refugees via Zoom and phones, which had not been the case before, doing in the past days in person, and or whether it's other organizations, two that come to mind that I know have relationships with JDC and JDC Entwine. That's Agahozo Shalom in Rwanda and Gabriel Project Mumbai in India. That the care with which they are trying to tend to the needs of their populations. So in Agahozo Shalom, unfortunately, when Rwanda went into lockdown itself, the village was closed, and these very vulnerable children are going back to situations that perhaps they're even more vulnerable in many ways, and the care with which the staff at Agahozo Shalom are really trying to tend to those needs. And same goes for Gabriel Project Mumbai. I've heard amazing stories of the local staff there working in the slums in Mumbai and in remote villages in India to help people who generally are hand to mouth. And so economic shutdown for them means they have no way of feeding their families. And those organizations and their local staff's ability to pivot and mobilize and really use compassion and do so quickly has been really impressive and a bright spot for me.
Yeah, Gabriel Project Mumbai posted a beautiful update on their Facebook today with pictures, which is something we were all talking about yesterday is how as an organization do you balance meeting COVID-19 specific needs in the developing world and the other pressing needs that are always there, many of which you said in the slums, those needs did not go away. Avital, you mentioned the locust issue in Ethiopia right now. On an organizational level, how do you address those contrasting needs that are both incredibly pressing in the moment? Yes, Avital, if you want to start.
Well, we think that sleep is overrated right now. And I'm joking, but it's close to be true. And it's very stressful right now, I must say, because although we feel that, JDC runs JCDR, which is a Jewish Coalition for Disaster and Relief. And we've been, the coalition most of the big Jewish organizations are part of this coalition, and we try to convene and to see what the needs are. And people are really in the coalition are struggling because, for example, WHJR or HIAS or other organizations are saying, especially, this is so important, but locally the needs are so big. So we feel that people may not be interested right now in the developing world. And it's a challenge. And frankly, you can understand it. I guess all of you, even the participant that we don't see, but Arielle will share with us who you are. I'm sure you're feeling it yourself, that the stress is around your families and around the community and making and adjust your regular life to it. But today we had an encouraging session with our board members, and a broker committee, and mostly from the US, and we asked them, will you be interested in listening or learning about other issues rather than the COVID right now? Our work in the Tov, we want to start the Locust Challenge and find solutions and other issues. And they said at the beginning, they wrote us that before the meeting, they didn't feel that anyone could pay attention to anything else but the COVID. But during the meetings, when we showed them a GIF of how does it look like when a locust attack, and how what we're doing in Tov, and I shared with Arielle the clip that I hope she'll share with you, and I hope you'll all visit Tov when this whole situation is finished, or if not, we'll create a virtual reality journey and bring you all there. And at the end of the session, they said that they've changed the answer, and they even were released to hear about other things that are pressing right now, and to kind of escape from our own situation. And at the end of the day, once you have food and your home is a good place, and you have internet and you can speak with your friends, it's a very different situation from the refugees camps in places in the world, and of course in Africa, in India, and in other poor countries. So this is the balance we're trying to work on now. Fundraising has been very, very challenging, but you know, those are always times for innovations and opportunities. There was an article about our work in during the COVID, and an Israeli company called us and said, look, we have a machine that turns, we invented a machine that got a lot of prices, that turns air to water. This is so cool. If we can bring it to the hospital we work in Ethiopia and put it on the roof, and all of a sudden we have water for the hospital, and probably we wouldn't have known about it unless the issue of the COVID came out and they want to help, and they're all of a sudden interested in Africa and not in Europe and in the US or the regular markets that they work with. So we have to look at opportunities, but frankly, the challenges are enormous. And as an organization that works on other communities, Jewish communities in Europe, in former FSU, and of course, Israel, well, we have a severe competition, and a very fair one, because the needs there didn't disappear. You know, they're real. So this is the challenge right now.
Thanks. And Dyonna, from your perspective, how are you seeing this challenge of COVID-19 response versus all of the other problems that were already there, like the refugee crisis, as you mentioned before?
Sure. So I've been thinking about this a lot, because part of OLAM's mandate is to turn to the global Jewish community and put global service and international development more prominently on the radar screen. And so how do we do that at a time when everybody is hyper-local, hunkered down in their own homes and nuclear families? And there's a real paradox here, because it's clear to me that one of the biggest takeaways from coronavirus is that the world is interdependent, and if we ignore issues that appear to be far away, that's at our own peril. And also another takeaway is that issues that sometimes seem like they're very different, health systems, economic inequality, globalization, climate change, as we're seeing in coronavirus, those are all interconnected, and it's really hard to tease those apart also. And so I think it's really important to be making the case for global responsibility at this time, even as everybody's really having issues to do that. And I just wanted to sort of give two personal tips, I think, for individuals who are grappling with that challenge. One is a question of just timing. You know, I think we're all on an organizational or individual level experiencing this in different phases. So for us, the first couple of weeks were about canceling or postponing OLAM's programs. And then we moved into the phase of, okay, what new programs do we roll out? And I think as on an individual level, people also go through phases. For me, it was first the shock of, how am I going to work at home with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old underfoot? And then it was getting into a rhythm, and then we're at the stage of, how long is this going to last? And so I think part of this is, it's natural for us to be dealing with hyperlocal needs, but as time goes on, we should be sort of thinking about those bigger takeaways. And then the other tip is, I've seen this poem on social media that says, everybody keeps saying we're all in the same boat, but it's actually not true. We're in the same storm, but not in the same boat. Different people are experiencing this in different ways. And so the way that I am experiencing coronavirus is very different from the extremely vulnerable populations in the developing world. And that means that I have a sense of responsibility to be passing on the sort of privilege that I have. And also within the Jewish community, you know, there are people who experience coronavirus as having a lot more time on their hands. And there are those who experience it as having no time on their hands. And so this is really a call for those who have more time to step up, to use this as an opportunity to learn, to donate, to volunteer virtually. And hopefully those of us who have less time now will be able to make up for that at some point.
Thank you. It's a very powerful message. And for our audience as well, just so you know, we're capturing a lot of these tips and articles and everything that's been mentioned, and just some concrete ways that you can get involved globally, and give to your communities. And we'll be sharing those out afterwards. Just being mindful of time, I want to ask you both one more question, and then we'll get to the audience questions. Something that fascinates me personally is that you're both women working in this field of international development, and very accomplished in your careers. Is there a gender lens that you bring to this work? And have you seen different ways that gender might play a role in COVID's impact around the world? Avital, if you want to start us off.
So first of all, I think the gender issue is so powerful in our work. I'm looking at the needs of our in the field, and women experience many more challenges than men, unfortunately, in those societies where you have patriarchic ways, and women do not have the means and do not have the money. And I find it so exciting once we're doing something, and even more when we're doing it with women. I'll give you one example. I was in Ethiopia on February 3rd, before everything, I mean, it was already on, but skies were still open. And I visited our Tov farmers, and I visited a woman. And I was so excited. She had managed to increase her crops dramatically. And now she has much more money than she used to have. And those are in a very poor area, you can imagine, with no electricity, very small homes from straw. So I asked her, what will you do with the money? I asked two women, I met two women there. So one told us that instead of a house from straw, she'll build a roof that will protect them from the rainy season. But the other one was more moving. It was more moving for me, because she said that they have 6 children, 4 guys and 2 girls. And the guys are still learning at school. They're 5th and 6th grade. And the girl stopped studying at the age, at the 4th grade. And she said that when she'll have, why? Because they have to walk 10 kilometers. I don't know how much is it in miles, but it's a long walk for children and for, and she's afraid that they will be raped on the way. So she stopped sending them to school, and she said that when she'll have more money, she'll buy a car and she'll take the girls to school every day, so they'll have a solid education. And this really warmed my heart. And I think as a woman, and I have 2 girls, and I never think that they won't be able to study, and this is so meaningful and so powerful. So this is something that I cherish, and we just finished a survey, a study that we did on best practices in the world in the area of women, and we'll be happy if Entwine will invite us again, and we'll share some of the outcomes of this surveys, and this will help us launch a new pilot, innovative pilot in India and in Ethiopia, working with women and branded as Imagine More. And I love this brand, Imagine More.
It's amazing. It's beautiful this year. Thank you for that. It's really inspiring. Dyonna, same question about women in these developing countries.
Sure. The one thing that I would add to Avital's very comprehensive and concrete response is just that this is the case both in developing countries and in other places as well. But lockdown is particularly challenging for people who are in abusive relationships. And so that's the case also in developing countries. And also, we've seen, based upon previous epidemics, whether it was Ebola or others, that the economic impacts of lockdown create a situation in which both women and children are more vulnerable to trafficking, to exploitation, to transactional sex, etc., as a result of extreme economic need. So those are 2 things that are on the forefront, I think, of the minds of many people who are working with vulnerable populations in developing countries. And, related to your question about a gender lens, one thing that is interesting, the first time when I met Avital, which was not so long ago, I was very impressed by her, because when we started getting to know each other, the first sentence she said to me is, "I am Avital and I am the mother of 2 daughters." And then she went on to explain her professional background. And I took that as a note for myself, because if I mention my 2 kids, I mention that at the end of my sort of personal bio, not at the beginning. And that is a lesson that I learned from Avital. And I think that one of the things that has been interesting in coronavirus is it collapses this false myth of division between personal life, family, and work, which I think working mothers, and in particular, that's sort of my lens, know that is a false division, and we are often juggling both of those at the very same time. And so I actually hope that maybe one of the silver linings on coronavirus is that there is this recognition that we are our full selves, and that we can walk into a professional meeting like Avital and say, "I am the mother of 2 daughters and I've done such and such," with pride. And so that, for me, I don't know if that's a gender lens, but it's something that both I'm taking away from my relationship with Avital, but also I hope that coronavirus is a lesson for everybody in that regard too.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about how this is impacting everyone on an individual level, on a local level, on a national level, and just thinking about the norms in our own households, the changes we're going to see moving forward. So thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting. I'm going to take, we have some questions from the audience. I think we have time for just 1 or 2, and I'll get the answers to the rest of them and send out to the group. My first question, it looks like here, what, if any, is the outlook for international travel, especially as both of you work with organizations that send groups abroad all the time? What might we be looking at in the future?
So we don't know. We actually don't know. It's an unknown because even when the skies will be open here in Israel and in the US and in Europe, we don't know what will happen with the pandemic in the countries we work at. So it might be dangerous to go there once, even while everything is over in our countries. But I, I guess all of us, even in the audience, if we weren't optimistic and looking at the half full, we should look at it this way. I'm sure it will happen sooner than later. And I think we should look at creative ways to bring, I said before, virtual journeys, even virtual reality, and try to bring the journeys here. We were talking about it today to do 45 minutes webinars on our work in the countries we work here, and that will include really in somehow imagining being there, and maybe use technology to create real virtual realities with those glasses and the 3 dimensions that are all available right now. Don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we will definitely see, and it will probably, the answer will change every day. Dyonna, you mentioned a lot of articles and resources, or you both mentioned a lot of articles and resources, but we have a question about what are things we should be following to get our global news, and is there anything else you would recommend that, any publications or resources that people should look into?
I mean, I'll do a shameless plug. OLAM's website and newsletter and Facebook page. We're constantly sharing things that are happening from our 50 partner organizations. So I think it was shared in the chat, but I'll share it again, olamtogether.org. And you can sign up for the newsletter on the bottom, and we're constantly curating articles, ways to take action, and the work of Jewish and Israeli organizations around the world.
Perfect. We're out of time, but I want to ask really quickly, maybe Avital, if you could close us out, just at a time when there are so many profound human needs close to home, what's an easy way the people here can make a case to invest in and support non-Jewish communities around the world, or Jewish communities around the world, just looking outside of our local sphere?
You know, I'm coming from the field of disabilities, and we always said that an inclusive community is a stronger one. And I do believe that working on behalf of vulnerable populations right now in the developing world makes us stronger. And I think you can engage your friends in a Zoom meeting saying, let's bring other content that you were not exposed to up until now. I promise if you turn to us, and I'm sure Dyonna will do the same, to bring the best stories ever, the best pictures, the best clips. The content will be extremely inspiring and engaging. And I think it's, we're only stronger as our weakest link, and we're all interconnected, and this is one world, and the butterfly effect can't be more realistic. It's now more realistic than ever. So us working on behalf of other communities will only make us stronger.
Beautiful, thank you. That's definitely a message I will take with me. So thank you both so much. I'm fangirling a little bit. It's just been so wonderful to speak with you and to learn from you. And we really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you to our audience also for taking the time to join us today. And to joining us every week. I want to share a couple of things we have coming up with Entwine programming. First, on Friday, we're going to have a Shabbat celebration at 12 p.m. Eastern time, which we hope you will join us for. And then some of our programming next week, it's Yom HaAtzmaut. So we're going to be highlighting some of our Israeli alumni and sharing stories from Israel and how they are celebrating during this challenging time. Next Thursday, we're going to sit down with Michael Hartal from the Brookdale Institute for a really interesting conversation around how governments and organizations use data and research to make decisions during times of crisis. You can find all of these details and more on the thread, and also in our field notes, our newsletter, which you're welcome to sign up for. And finally, we are creating these virtual programs to help all of you stay connected globally, and we would love to know how we're doing. For those of you on Zoom, as soon as I close out, a survey link should pop up with just a couple of questions so we can gather your feedback. And as always, feel free to reach out to me directly, be in touch with people on the Entwine staff, and we'll take all of your feedback into consideration. And again, I will follow up with everyone with all of the amazing resources and learnings that Dyonna and Avital shared with us today. Thank you again. Lovely to see you, and have a great night. It's late in Israel. Hope you get some sleep in this crazy time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.